In today's video, we're going to be looking at the withdrawal strategy that rich retirees use that most retirees don't, and how you can utilize them in your own retirement. You know, one of the biggest misconceptions I tend to hear when I'm speaking to clients who are entering in retirement is that they should manage their income according to a safe withdrawal strategy. But unfortunately, for the majority of retirees, following this advice can be very dangerous. And that's exactly why we're making this video today, to reveal the tactics that smart retirees use to make their money last, and how following certain withdrawal strategies can be incredibly dangerous. So let's get into the video. So why should retirees avoid the 4% rule? Well, the 4% rule is another way of saying safe withdrawal rate, and there really is no such thing as a truly safe withdrawal rate. And that's because the future is inherently uncertain. There are numerous variables that affect how long your savings will last. And we hear about safe withdrawal percentages because we need something to base simple conversations around and to service the masses of people who are retiring who lack good advice. But it's important to avoid depending on a safe withdrawal rate for many reasons, but here are three. Number one, the past is not the future. Number two, improper implementation of safe withdrawal rules. And then the third one is limitations of using fixed starting percentages. So let's start with the past is not the future. The economy, it's always changing. Inflation rates, demographic shifts, forward-looking assumptions. The past is not the future, and assuming that the future is going to happen like the past is dangerous. What about improper implementation of safe withdrawal rules? Well, though the 4% rule sounds straightforward, this withdrawal strategy, along with others that sound plain, are not as simple as they sound. I've had conversations with people who have even been in the finance profession for decades, and they couldn't tell you how to properly implement the 4% rule. For example, the 4% rule is based on a certain portfolio allocation. If your portfolio doesn't have an allocation of at least 50 to 80% in equities, then you're not following one of the rules or requirements of it. So my point here is that people are not aware of the details surrounding these simple anecdotal withdrawal strategies. And there are limitations to using fixed starting percentages. And what I mean by that is the 4% might be a safe withdrawal percentage when you're 60, but is it the right percentage when you're 70? You see, as we grow older, the risk of running out of money to create income for us in retirement, that gets smaller, and that means you might be able to afford enjoying the benefits of more of your portfolio and still have a reasonable level of confidence that you won't outlive your money. So what we need in a withdrawal strategy, in fact, what we're seeking, is that we don't want to run out of money. We want to have a steady monthly income. We want to have some way to be a little bit flexible. We want to know that the risk of running out is very low so that we can enjoy it more. But with a safe withdrawal percentage like the 4% rule, on the one hand, we might potentially live longer than our savings because the future is not guaranteed to look like the past, and we're not really even checking back in with how it's going with our plan because we're basing it off of a really old study. We're not confident about adding flexibility to our spending, and we're not really aware if it's okay for us to spend more because we're really just flying blind without any system other than what we may have started when we first retired. We end up using tools that look like this image. This is based off of a probability of success dial, and though tools like this can be useful for some things, they are terrible when it comes to creating retirement income. You might have a 90% probability of success or even 100%, but if your withdrawal strategy isn't accounting for the current environment and reading what's going on in the times, probability of success is more like probability of being disappointed. If your plan is 100% probable, then it's 100% probable of dying super rich and quite possibly not getting the most enjoyment from your money. Now, as a quick aside, if you want to learn more about managing your retirement income without the stress of wondering if you're doing it correctly, I want to encourage you to click the second link in the video description to book a no-cost call with our team of retirement professionals. Now, let's transition to how the smartest retirees use a withdrawal strategy called risk-based guardrails and how they provide a steady monthly income, but also provide some dynamic flexibility, whereas the safe withdrawal percentage strategies are a fixed static percentage. And other than adding inflation adjustments to them, they're pretty much staying the same. Dynamic withdrawal strategies, they're not a fixed percentage. Dynamic strategies do provide you with a stable monthly income, so don't think that it's up and down all the time, but it does have that ability to be flexible or spend in a pattern that more matches people's lifestyle. So the goal that everyone has is to spend more of your money over time. But just in case you're one of those unlucky minority and you happen to retire during what turns out to be a period somewhat like the 1960s stagflation or Great Depression, and maybe we have rough times for too long, well then the guardrails are gonna make some corrective adjustments. Now I'm going to show you an example of what they look like and exactly how the guardrails adjust. But before I do that, let me contrast a key difference. You see, the 4% rule is based on that static starting percentage, and it assumes that you never have to check back in, whereas the dynamic strategy, guardrails, it allows you to explore the trade-off between your current spending and the future possibility of unplanned increases or decreases to your steady monthly income. Okay, so this is a family that has just over $1 million between all of their accounts. Their spending capacity is $12,021 per month, and that's $10,853 after paying taxes. So now this number includes all sources such as Social Security, pensions, and of course the withdrawal that will come from their portfolio. Now, in other places, they can see exactly how that income is going to be broken down. In fact, let me show it to you really quickly. So here we see Social Security income for him, Social Security income for her, pension, and the withdrawals from the portfolio. And on this page, we see it in a graph format. So the black that you see there represents the portfolio withdrawal. The purple is the part-time work, and the rest is Social Security and pension. So let's go back to what we were looking at. $12,021 per month. The guardrails monitor the value of your portfolio. And here we see that if the $1,052,000 rises to $1.235 million, then the monthly income can increase to $14,106 per month. And if the value decreases, then hits that lower guardrail, then that value goes down to $890,000. Then the $12,021 per month would need to drop to $11,420. And this might drop for a brief period or a longer period depending upon how the future plays out. Now, these guardrails are not fixed guardrails forever. They monitor several data inputs about your financial story and the market and the economic environment, and they adjust. And I'm going to show you exactly what they monitor and how they make their changes. But before I do that, I need to clarify, risk-based guardrails are a more modern form of guardrails. There's an older version of guardrails that are actually static and they don't adjust. And this is an important distinction to make. Okay, so these guardrails can adjust, but what are they monitoring and what are the rules that make them adjust? So first of all, we're going to be monitoring current capital market assumptions. That's what are the current interest rates, how are they higher right now, but they're going to taper down in the future. Large cap might have an expected 10% annualized return, but the near future expected outlook is much lower than that, so this needs to be reflected. Same thing with inflation. Inflation might be 3% for the long term, but not every single year. We need to reflect what real inflation is going to be on a year-by-year basis or what it has been, and we need to update that as the plan goes along. It's interesting, your age. Most financial planning software will plan to say 90 or 95 years old, a static number. This one adjusts. So as you get older, your risk of running out of money, it actually goes down, but at the same time, your life expectancy goes up as you get older. So your plan needs to have some consideration for that. And probably the most important thing that is analyzed is your expected cash flows. So that would be your future cash flows, like earmarking money for paying for healthcare, paying for a wedding, and that's going to be very unique to you. So all of these things are happening. Capital market assumptions, inflation, your increasing age, your future expected cash flows, and this is where a little bit of sophistication happens, and it's not as simple as guardrails sound. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the sausage is made here, so bear with me here. So here's how the adjustments to the guardrails are determined. first, your spending capacity is going to be set based on whatever amount equals a Monte Carlo estimated 20% chance of experiencing a future decrease in your spending and an estimated 80% chance of a future increase in your spending. So if you were looking at traditional Monte Carlo planning software, it would look like this. It would say 80% success. And that's another way of saying there's a 20% chance of needing to make a reduction to your spending. I hope that makes sense. Next, because the risk level of any income amount that you're spending on a monthly basis, it's going to change as time and circumstances change. So you're going to need a plan for what would determine an increase in income and a plan for how you would determine a decrease in income. So here it is. I want you to imagine those probability of success dials that you see in Monte Carlo and traditional planning. So an income increase plan could be if the chance of needing a decrease reaches 0%, then increase the spending by a set amount. And for your income decrease plan, if the chance of a future income decrease reaches 75%, then decrease the income by a set amount. The reason the guardrails like this are important is that if you have a traditional retirement plan that says you are 100% successful, that means that you're leaving money on the table. It means that you have a 0% chance that you're ever going to have to reduce your spending. It also means you could have more money and still have had a reasonable amount of risk during your retirement. The problem with the probability dial is that people feel like an 80% successful plan means that they have a 20% possibility of failure. And that's not true at all. They have an 80% chance that their planned spending will work and a 20% chance that they might need to adjust their spending. There's a big difference between that and failure. Nobody really ever fails retirement, they adjust. And I like the risk-based guardrails because they help you understand by how many dollars we should adjust. And it takes those unusable percentages and it makes them practical by putting it into dollar form. I think smart retirees use this strategy because they want to preserve their wealth. Meaning they want to protect themselves during those significant prolonged market downturns, but they don't want to be tricked into reducing their spending prematurely. And what I mean by that is those short-term and mid-term bear markets. It doesn't necessarily mean that a person should cut back spending, and that's because their plan and their future needed cash flows are unique to them. And there really isn't a way of truly knowing how bad a bear market is for an individual person's plan without a sophisticated risk-based guardrails plan to adjust like the one I just mentioned. But I also think smart retirees also want to maximize their control they have over how much money they leave to their estate versus doing something with it while they're alive. With these static withdrawal rates, we end up with a glide path image like I showed you earlier. It looks like this. And that tail end of the plan can tend to have a lot of unspent money as part of your estate. But if you compare that to a typical glide path example from a guardrail system, it looks like this. And here you can see that the tail end slopes down much lower. And that's because with guardrails, you're being told that you can spend more as long as it becomes acceptable within your risk profile to do so. And another reason that I think smart retirees like risk-based guardrails for their retirement strategy is that they want to make sure that their spending adjusts for what inflation really is rather than that generic 3% forever. So that means during low inflation periods, they reflect that, and then during higher inflation periods, they're getting those larger increases for spending. So what are the pros and cons of the modern risk-based guardrails strategy? Well, the pros are you know when it's possible to spend more, you know when a bear market is truly hurting your plan or not as you're going through retirement, you know when you need to take action to preserve your portfolio and you're getting practical instructions on how to do so, and you know you're getting the most from your hard-earned savings, and that can be within that defined risk level that you determine. Now, the cons are the complexity. It requires ongoing monitoring. Even if you created your own rules and followed them, you need to constantly be monitoring them each month and updating things like capital market assumptions and life expectancies. But you could do that. You could use Monte Carlo probability software. You could set up some rules like the ones I described in today's video, and you can follow them. Or you could outsource it, which might be a much more safer bet to do that. Now, we can only break down how to implement guardrails in a small amount of detail here because we only have a short amount of time, but we've prepared an entire video that walks through guardrails and other aspects of retirement planning in more detail. If you want to watch that video, click the first link in the description and check it out. So now that you know the withdrawal strategy the smartest retirees use, you can further plan your retirement success. However, there are details on how to implement guardrails that we haven't been able to cover here, as I just mentioned. So if you want a team of professionals to actually sit down with you and help you prepare your own guardrail strategy, click the first link in the description and we'll help you one-on-one. We'll see you in the next one.